All right, hello everybody, and welcome to today's ILTA webinar, Clearing the Fog Surrounding a Move to the Cloud. I'm Nicole and I'll be serving as your moderator, and our speakers today are Nick Lacey and Howard Russell with RBRO Solutions. I also want to thank RBRO Solutions for sponsoring today's webinar. Today's presentation will run about 45 to 60 minutes, and we ask that you submit any questions you have into the Q&A box, and if they are not addressed during the presentation, they will be addressed at the end. Before we start, please also know that we're recording today's webinar and we'll post a link to our website under recording shortly after today's presentation. Also at the end, we ask that you take a few moments to complete the evaluation polling that you will see appear on your screen. I'll now turn the webinar over to Nick.
Well, thank you very much, Nicole. I appreciate that. I'll be kickstarting today's seminar. And first, I also want to just say good afternoon to everyone out there on the line. And I'll just quickly introduce RBRO to all the folks out there. We have been a premier iManage partner for over 15 years with over 700 iManage engagements. And what we do, we help our clients with best practices and know-how to essentially simplify iManage implementations, upgrades, and migrations. So complexity must create simplicity. That really drives everything we do. And we pride ourselves on our iManage expertise and client responsiveness. Since I've been with RBRO, what I've really enjoyed is the high-level engagements I have had collectively as a team with our clients. So without further ado, I'd like to turn this over to our CEO, your presenter today, Howard Russell.
Thanks so much, Nick. Folks, definitely there are a lot of questions that I've heard about moving to the cloud, and whether it's the iManage cloud or cloud application of some sort, those questions have been out there. And I've interacted with a lot of folks who have a lot of different perspectives about the cloud. And so I want to talk about some of those things a little bit today and maybe clear some of that fog, and maybe I'll learn something from some of you as we continue through as well. So I want to start off with some of the objections, because whenever you start talking about the cloud in any group, there's always going to be some folks that are going to say, why should we, or why would we go to the cloud? And it might be because that individual feels to themselves that there's the saving that they might obtain through hardware is not significant enough to offset the cost of the cloud license. And it might be that they say to themselves, you know what, okay, so I moved the hardware out, but now I've got, an AWS environment that I've got to deal with, and all the many forms and interfaces there that you've got to interact with. It's just absolutely no fun. Some might say, well, the costs seem higher. So am I really going to get a benefit? The application works here on-prem, it'll work in the cloud. Where's the real benefit for me of moving to the cloud if it looks like it's just going to cost me a little bit more from a licensing perspective? And then, of course, there's those of us that love to type those SQL statements and queries into the back end of those finance management systems and the back end of those matter management solutions or our document management solution. And we're saying to ourselves, I lose that. I don't have that ability to be as free as I want with the back end, and that's not necessarily good for me. And of course, then loudly, in many cases, you hear the cloud is not secure. And I think for many of us, it's as much a question as it is a statement. And so the question then becomes, how do we respond to those things? As part of the why, the less expensive has come up. You've heard in some cases that, it's cheaper to go to the cloud because we don't have to manage all these things. And that might be true in some circumstances, but not necessarily always if you're looking at it purely from a licensing cost perspective, that the cloud is less expensive. So then if that's the case, then what makes us want to go to the cloud? And there may be a case to be made for some solutions. And of course, there are some trade-offs that we might consider as we move to the cloud. A great example for us might be the movement or the migration of our finance system to the cloud version of that application. And so, yeah, we've got an annual subscription that we've got to deal with in terms of the cost of that solution. But at the same time, there are some new collaborative capabilities that we've got with respect to our auditors. As much as we might want to or not want to collaborate with our auditors, it definitely can streamline some of that process for us. And there's some other key capabilities that we've obtained by moving to the cloud that we no longer have to worry about in terms of accessibility and so on. So there are definitely other trade-offs that you've got to walk through with the cloud, and we'll talk through that as we progress through today. So as we get into the why then, so on the security front, some might be worried, we're exposing our data on the cloud. We put it up there and someone's going to have potential access to that. You think about the artists that have had their most intimate moments downloaded from their Dropbox or iCloud or somewhere else, or you might think of individuals or organizations that have had compromises, and you think to yourself, I'm not putting any of my stuff on the cloud because it's not secure, and look at these stories. I think the fact is, though, that those stories aren't just cloud related. They're often stories that tie directly to private data networks, private storage areas where content is held that also are breached. So it's not necessarily the location of the content, it's more about how that content is being managed and controlled. And so it is true, not all cloud solutions are created equal, and definitely not all cloud solutions are managed with equal levels of confidence or competence. And so there's some research that needs to be done. There's SLAs that you need to understand with regards to security before you entrust your information or your application or capabilities to any cloud service provider. So really, really important. At the same time, if you're someone who thinks that you lock the door to your server room and everything's safe, definitely you might want to rethink that. A key thing around security that we consider is that folks might have a network analyst working in your firm, and if your firm is maybe 50 users or 100 users or even a couple hundred users, even 1,000 users, the question might be the security experts that are monitoring and watching your networks and tracking that. Where's their experience level? How often are they having to deal with threats and contain and to manage that? And then if you think about enterprise level cloud applications and the interactions that the security professionals might have in those instances or in those environments, there's definitely something to be said for the experience on that level. And of course, from an enterprise cloud application or cloud organization perspective, there's that liability piece that they very, very much want to avoid, which lends to a strong, significant focus on security. So I'd say there's a good case to be made for cloud security. Then there's the feature side of things, and the image here is an interesting one. The image of on the slide here of this large mountain of ice above the water, but just recognizing that there's a much larger component of that ice underneath, and that idea that there's much, much more below the surface of any significant feature that you might obtain within an application. And definitely, as organizations are moving towards greater features and capabilities within the applications, there's always a question for the technical folks on the back end, the business administrators and so on. How much effort do we want to put into learning these significant applications? The complexity is increasing for some of these applications in order to deliver that value. And of course, the question then becomes, how much time do we want to spend trying to understand that complexity to deliver that value? So getting really strong features is definitely going to be something that is a focus of someone moving to the cloud. From a growth expectations perspective, organizations that are maybe merging, and that's happening a lot within the law firm space, certainly even within corporate and the impacts of that on corporate legal and finance and so on, as organizations are merging, as their products or their capabilities are growing, and the number of individuals they work with grow. Of course, the infrastructure to support that needs to grow as well. And as that infrastructure grows and the complexity of that infrastructure grows, the question then becomes, how do you manage that in a way that is effective for your users, but at the same time cost effective and effective in driving the priorities of your organization? Then you've got the shifting mindset. Many, many more individuals working within law firms, within corporate legal departments, finance organizations, and so on, are looking for that mobility, not just from the perspective of being able to make a phone call or to read an email, but now what they're demanding is the ability to perform their day-to-day work functions from wherever they happen to be. And so it's not enough to have to set up a VPN connection or to have to figure out how to get into a Citrix instance of content or applications. They want it to work with their mobile phones. And so this empowerment that we're trying to offer to, and in particular, are some of the younger professionals coming into the marketplace who demand it because that's what they live day to day with their consumer applications. This mindset is really driving the need again for that underlying infrastructure to drive the value to where it needs to be. So what does the ROI look like then? And again, the things that we're talking about today, I might share as iManage professionals. We're exceptional at what we do in the iManage space, but the things that I'm talking about really do apply right across the board. It'll apply whether you're doing a document management, consulting engagement, implementation, upgrade. It'll apply whether you're moving your finance system to the cloud, you're thinking about doing that, or some other line of business application. These principles really do apply across the board. And so even though you might hear more from me about iManage, because that's what we do and we're quite proud of it, I think these principles are broadly applicable. And so hopefully you guys can receive it from that perspective. So predictability, manageability, accessibility, these are all forms of ROI. It's not always about the dollars and cents from a hard perspective, but also the dollars and cents from a holistic perspective of how your business is doing. And so talk to some large organizations, and the idea of operational expense versus capital is a big deal in helping them to make the decision to move to cloud. If I've got to go ahead and refresh my hardware every 5 years or so, and for whatever reason, all my servers have to be replaced. Well, that's a lot of money. It's a lot of hardware. It's a lot of expertise to get it up and running. And at the same time, that senior partner maybe that's approaching retirement might be saying to themselves, what's in it for me? This is a significant capital outlay. I'm retiring next year, and I'm not really going to get the benefit of any of this. I don't want to be involved in this project. And there comes the stop sign. And so can we move to a place where costs are spread out over time, and folks are receiving and paying for the benefits that they're receiving in any given time period, as opposed to large spikes from time to time that might create partner departure events and so on. Manageability of costs associated with your servers and your server rooms. Over time, you're spending a lot of effort and costs in keeping things going. And of course, firms are wanting to decrease those costs, and they ask themselves, where do we want to put our focus? And it might be that you're in this place where you recognize that the solutions that you work with are constantly changing. New features, new capabilities are constantly appearing within those solutions. And you're asking yourself, how much technical effort do I want to have to employ to learn these new solutions, to learn the underlying changes that support the value that I'm going to deliver? And so we want to spend less time on that and more time on learning the value itself and participating in the value side of things. And of course, accessibility, as I mentioned before, mobility is really, really increasing in importance, and not just mobility for the sake of interacting with data, but mobility for the sake of performing typical day-to-day business functions. Very, very important for folks that we're talking to. So getting there, a couple of profiles that you run into, and again, I'm going in this case from the perspective of documents, but certainly this would apply to data that would exist within almost any application, because we're looking to move. Much simpler if you're just moving application functionality. It's about turning it off here and turning it on there. But the moment you have internal data, client information, and so on, that has to be part of that process, then folks start to get a little worried. So you've got a profile here of an organization, corporate legal department, maybe a smaller law firm that's got under 2 million documents. Or you might have a profile of an organization that has more than that, up to several million. We have firms today that we're supporting through movements to the cloud that have 12, 16, 20 terabytes of data, millions and millions, 40, 50, 60 million documents that they're needing to move from their on-prem environment to the cloud. And so these are real profiles of organizations that we're talking about, and the challenges and opportunities that are in front of them. You've got sources. You might, in the case that I'm talking about here, have iManage on-premise. Or your data might be existing today in a file system a third-party file system, such as another document management solution like OpenText or Starlaw or Content Worker, WorldDocs, and you're moving into the iManage world. Or it might be that that's not what's going on. It might be that you're just looking to take data out of an on-prem finance system and move it up to the cloud. So there's a lot of different scenarios that you might find yourself in as you're moving this data, but they're all things that we have to consider. As you're moving your data to the cloud, you also have to consider, are we merging with another organization? And is there data from both those organizations? In one situation, we had a customer that they'd merged with another firm, and they had to bring together their accounting, practice management solution, matter management solutions. They had to bring together the document management solution. And of course, there's the data resolution that has to happen around that. Consolidation of multiple libraries into one for the purpose of moving to the cloud. And then, of course, in our particular environment, iManage, you might have had that solution for the last 10, 15 years. And so you might have legacy data structures, folder structures, and best practices that are now out of date. And of course, the question becomes, do you want to move that content to the cloud in its current form, or do you want to make changes to that as you're going? So it's really important to consider these types of things. And the more you consider these things, of course, the more worried you get. And you think to yourself, are we ever going to be able to accomplish this? In the case of a document management migration, I've got millions of documents, and I don't want to disrupt my users. I want them to be able to continue to work. Some of them bill hundreds of dollars an hour, and some of them bill over $1,000 an hour. So disruptions are not a good thing. And so what does that look like? Life can actually go on. It can actually be fine going through a process like this. Things don't have to break, and IT doesn't have to get fired. So if you're looking at a file system, for example, or a separate DMS, this is just an example of a migration to iManage. But these principles, again, apply to any type of movement of data from on-prem to the cloud that you might have. And so you want to make sure that you have solutions that can actually take your content in terms of those intermediary solutions or processes that will take your content directly from your on-prem environment directly to the cloud. In this case, from a file system or a third-party DMS directly to the iManage cloud. You want to be able to perform an initial migration if it's a larger organization and you've got significantly more data. Maybe from a bandwidth perspective, doing a direct migration to the cloud is going to result in a very, very, very long migration process. And so you want to do an initial migration to a temporary on-premise staging environment, ship secure disk or FTP to the cloud. But once that's done, the solution you're working with has to have the ability to then connect to your current on-prem environment and continue to synchronize data from those file folders or from that other document management system on a continuous basis so that nothing's being missed, but also to do it in a way that doesn't interrupt your users in their day-to-day activities. So really important to be able to do that. You want to make sure that you're leaving some time and resource to think about application rollout and so on. And so that's something you've got to plan through. And your overall outage windows to hours is something you want to do. You want to move that outage window down to hours rather than having an outage window of days. And if you can do that, then you really have a choice about when you want to go live. You don't have to make it a weekend thing. You can have it be an evening in the middle of the week thing. If you do that effectively, saves everybody time, saves you money, and keeps your IT guys just a little bit happier, and that's always a good thing. So what do? We've got a solution in this case called Import Management that supports that kind of thing. So it's just an example of one of the solutions that might be used in a scenario like this. Depending on your scenario, again, you might be using a different type of tool. But from our perspective, a reliance on the APIs that come along with the solution you're moving to, very, very important, because it ensures that you're following the business rules of that application and that you don't have issues with data quality when that content gets in, and or data consistency or interaction consistency. You want to make sure that tool can provide that continuous sync that you need, automatically process deltas of information. You want to be able to transform your data on the fly. So if your data exists in a particular organized fashion on the source, but it needs to go to the destination in a different way. You need your solutions to be able to do that for you. Again, that ability to reorganize content on the fly is really important to ensuring that you can have the Delta process moving without having to have a long shutdown period while you're trying to massage data, that final bit of data into the structures that you need. You need to be able to merge data together from those third-party libraries or file systems as well. And of course, you need a solution that's scalable to the size of the data repository that you're moving so that it can do that effectively. Maybe you're an organization, in this case, that's already on a document management system like iManage, and so you're on this application already, and all you want to do is you just want to move the application to the cloud. And maybe some of those features such as full text search, security management, monitoring, and so on are features that you're enjoying in your on-premise environment. You want to make sure that on go live day, you don't have your help desk flooded with calls around the fact that users can't do things that they used to be able to do yesterday. You don't want to create that crisis of confidence as part of that process. And so in order to get past that, you want to be able to make sure that this idea of darkest before dawn isn't something that's in your implementation playbook, if you will. Users should be able to go from light to light. They should be able to go from working today to working tomorrow, as opposed to working today to a lot of pain tomorrow with promises that it'll get better. And so if we're, in our case, from an iManage on-premise, it's important that users, when they get in the system, shut down for a half an hour today, when they get back up a half an hour later or the next morning, they should still be in the same users, groups, and roles. Their context in terms of their work areas, their My Matters, their favorites, those types of things should be there just like they were yesterday, and they should be able to just continue working as if nothing had changed, even though things have changed. Their content changes, the changes to structures, the version fidelity, all that kind of stuff, linked folders, the collaboration activities that they've been able to enjoy with their clients. None of that should change because they've moved from on-prem to the cloud. It should all be there. And so that's something that we try to make sure that we take into account in the solutions that we build. Again, we deal with the back end of it, the complexity part, so that simplicity becomes the client experience on the front end, and that you've got that great adoption and user confidence. And really, you should be able to go live any day of the week. It should be your choice as to what you want to do. So how do we do it? We've got a solution in this case called Lift and Shift. Really straightforward process, simple interfaces that allow us and our clients, if they choose to do that, or our partners, and we have many partners in the iManage ecosystem, they should be able to take these tools and use these tools to facilitate that movement to the cloud. So whether you're taking just part of your iManage instance, or whether you're taking the entire instance, you should be able to do that and make your choice about how you want things to move. And of course, the solutions, again, based upon the latest REST APIs, and if you're moving an accounting solution and so on, again, you want to make sure that the tools that you're using are well suited to the environment you're going towards, so that you don't have to worry about errors that come due to scripting issues, if we're doing things kind of around the system, but that you're actually following the business rules of those applications. Things like continuous synchronization, again, continue to be really, really important. And again, that ability to be able to process significant amounts of data in short periods of time, and to be able to ensure that the synchronization process leads to little or no downtime. I think those are really, really important concepts to work through. This idea, again, of complexity must create simplicity for us. It drives kind of everything we do, as Nick alluded to. And so when we think about the process of moving to the cloud, here's a simple workflow this is an on-prem iManage to a cloud type workflow. But it's similar to what you'd want to think of, again, for just about any solution. So you'd want to be able to configure your source and destination. You want to understand where your content's coming from and where it's going. You want to make some decisions about how your content is going to flow to the cloud based upon the size of the content that you're working with. And so in the case of a large content repository, there are ways of backing up that content, shipping it securely, and then having that content merged in. Typically, most cloud organizations have that capability to do bulk data loads for an initial load. The challenge, of course, then becomes the synchronization of change data. And in some circumstances, that bulk load results in significant downtime for organizations as they are preparing to move to the cloud in order to avoid data changes that can't be synchronized. In the case of iManage and in the case of a cloud move in this sense, it's absolutely possible to do a bulk data load and then to have up to the second synchronization of the remaining data that's happening during your UAT periods and so on. So you perform your syncs, you pause for UAT. I think it's really important from an adoption perspective for users to be able to play. Key users, those that are influential, those that understand the processes and the impacts, to be able to play in that new environment so that they can ascertain and bring confidence to everyone else that, yeah, this thing's going to work when we move. It really takes the fear down a whole nother level and allows folks to be able to positively move towards the new solution. And then when that UAT process is complete, you don't want to have to start from scratch again because that, of course, delays your project. You want to be able to just roll back those UAT changes really straightforwardly, and you want to be able to clean that up and then do a final sync and go live. And yet, again, you want to be able to go live on your terms. So really, really important that you've got a straightforward process laid out, that you know all the components of that process, and frankly, that as much of that process is automated as possible so that you're not having to worry about human error throughout the process. The next question then is when? When do I want to move to the cloud, or when should I move to the cloud? And for your firms, there's going to be different times and different reasons that you might want to do it. If you're a corporate legal department and you're looking for some new features and new functionality, and maybe you're thought of as the poor third cousin for IT, or you're thought of as a cost center and thus not to be focused on, you might be in a space where you're saying to yourself, but we need this, and regardless of what anyone else thinks, we are strategic, and the things that we're doing are absolutely critical for the organization, and we need some features and functionality that's going to help us to be more effective in completing the tasks that we've got in front of us. And so you might say to yourself, in order to avoid the brown money and things like that, you're going to want to move to the cloud, and you're going to want to move to the cloud rather than go through a significantly challenging process of working with internal IT to facilitate hardware and to facilitate services and the consulting and the business analysis work and all the rest of that kind of stuff that's going to get you to a place where you can start delivering the value that you want to deliver. So for you, your time is anytime you want to get that functionality and it's not available to you yet. But if you're an organization that's got an application and you're looking at it, you're thinking this is neat, but the next version has so much more to it. But at the same time, you're thinking to yourself, I don't want to have to go through the challenges of learning of that underlying mountain, if you will, beneath the iceberg. Then the maintenance renewal might be a time to say, you know what, we're gonna switch to an application that gives us the capabilities we want without forcing us to learn all this stuff. If you've got a hardware upgrade on the horizon and you're facing that meeting with that executive committee in your firm, and you know that there are partners on that committee that are thinking to themselves, large capital expenditures equals half retirement fund, or they just think to themselves it just doesn't make any sense to do it. There are many reasons that are not always necessarily just our personal income. But if you're in that situation, you might want to be able to look at things from the perspective of going to the cloud so that you can begin to level out your costs over time and create a more stable financial picture for your organization and for those that are monitoring and that care about that. Certainly, if your users have increased expectations around mobility, if you've been having challenges in facilitating an organization that is becoming much more global, or much more spread out, and you're thinking about being able to have that kind of remote access or multiple point access, it's a good time to start thinking about cloud. Or if you have stronger expectations around things like collaboration, or you're feeling a regulatory squeeze and you realize that, you know what, there's capabilities that we want in terms of our contract management, in terms of being able to identify key pieces of data within our environment. And we don't want to, again, have to put the infrastructure in place to be able to do that. You might want to go to the cloud in order to take advantage, in the case of iManage, of some of those neat capabilities that are coming around, Raven and so on. And so you might choose to go to the cloud for those reasons. So there's a myriad of reasons and certainly the timing of it is going to be very, very much based upon what's going on in your organization. I think it's fair and important to say you should never feel rushed. While partners like ourselves and even as we look to sell the iManage product and as you're looking at other cloud-based solutions, we definitely want to move more folks to the cloud because we think it's a good thing, but it has to be a good thing for you. And if you just purchased a significant amount of new hardware, you probably will wait for a few years to get the value out of that before a new investment. But if you're at the tail end of that, it might be a good thing for you. So just consider what your situation is and then make the right choice for your organization about the timing. Another thing you've got to keep in mind, though, is that while your applications might even be the same in terms of some of those interfaces, while you're on-prem to your initial foray to the cloud, and that's very true. One of the neat things about the iManage solution, I'm sure with others, is that they've created some great backwards compatibility so that even if you do move to the cloud application, your desktop software can continue to work as it has in the past, but you also now have this new ability to take advantage of key new features that have been made available on the cloud. And so certain things may not necessarily change, at least not immediately for your users, and you do have that ability to then start rolling out value over time. At the same time, you should be looking at things like other solutions that you might want to be moving to the cloud or that you have moved to the cloud. And you might want to ask yourself, what's the integration look like between the current iManage instance that I've got or the current software that I'm working with and this other software that it integrates with? Am I integrating right now through a back-end SQL query? Am I integrating through some other method? And am I able to continue those integrations into the cloud, or do they need to look a little bit different? Is there a cultural change that's happening from a collaboration perspective as you move to the cloud? And what does that look like? And are there new policies and practices that need to be built as part of this? And you want to make sure that you're taking that into account. Any significant move in solutions or capabilities always give you a great opportunity to kind of review how you do things and how people think about things. And why not take the opportunity to do that? There are updated interfaces, as I've mentioned, and certainly the things that you're really going to have to think about is those integrations and reporting. If you're an organization that has had lots of interaction with the back-end SQL environment in your document management system or practice management system and so on, and you're moving to the cloud, some of that goes away. And so the question for you then becomes, what do we actually need from the solution, and are there capabilities through the APIs provided by the cloud application, or are there solutions on the market or even from the primary vendor that are going to allow you to take advantage of some of the reporting capabilities and integration capabilities? This is something that we've definitely really been thinking hard about as an organization, and I think it's something that you should be asking all your vendors to think hard about. You may not be moving to the cloud today, but 2 years ago, many of our customers weren't moving to the cloud. But we had at that point to start thinking about what existence in the cloud looks like, and we've had to start building solutions and integrations and capabilities so that when our clients get to the cloud, we're ready to be able to offer them up the value that they need. And so you want to start even now talking to your vendors about what they're doing to facilitate your move to the cloud, if that's something that you're anticipating either in the short term, but definitely if in the long term it's something you're looking to do, you want to make sure that they're thinking about it now. So you may still not be feeling confident. You're thinking to yourself, this is not the rope bridge that I want to walk across because I don't feel like I know everything about what my experience is going to be like in the cloud. I feel like I need to know more. I need to understand it better. And I think that's a very, very reasonable place to be in. And I think that you might be more comfortable with certain applications and less comfortable with other applications. And so I think the most important thing that you can do is to get the education. Work with a team of individuals that have good expertise, solid expertise, with the applications that you're thinking might be strategic for you to move towards the cloud, so that they can help you to think about what those changes look like and to manage those changes, so that they can help you deal with the ancillary situations that might come up, like the merger or the transformation of content that you're moving between these containers or these spaces. It might be that you've got a lot of different repositories of information that have to come together as part of this, and that's something that we can certainly work through with you. And that's just 4 of the 100 or so questions that might be asked. And so definitely reach out to your partners to talk about that. As you move to the cloud, I think it's going to be really important that you try to avoid really negative situations. And so any migration can be fraught with peril as you start to move your data. Not even just a migration to the cloud. It might be a migration from one system to another system, and of course, it might be a migration from on-prem to cloud. And so you want to avoid those negative situations. So what you don't want is fear, and fear comes through lack of knowledge. Fear comes through bad experiences, and certainly in some organizations, and we've worked in many of these, where we come in and we sit down with folks and they say to us, the last time we did a project like this, the entire accounting department was down for 2 weeks, or folks couldn't do this, and so now we're really, really nervous about moving forward. And so you have to make sure that you build a communication strategy that's going to overcome fear, because if you have a lot of fear, you're not going to get the kind of cooperation that you need to move your project forward. You have to avoid downtime, and so all of your planning has to be about, or at least a significant amount of your planning has to be about minimizing user interruption, and so that, again, folks can feel confident that their work isn't going to be negatively impacted. When they're not confident that their work isn't going to be negatively impacted, roadblocks start coming up. Lost content or documents is definitely a scary thing, especially when it's financial data. And I've definitely seen and had experiences with that in organization. You want to be able to make sure that you've got a good plan. Our philosophy at RBRO is know your data. And when I say know your data, it means know your data at the source and know what it's going to look like on the destination even before it gets there. If you have great predictability, you're going to have great confidence as you move forward. Make sure synchronization is taken care of, but also make sure that you're thinking about those processes. There are processes sometimes they get missed because we're not paying enough attention, and that's a negative thing, and that's what you want to avoid. So what do you really want? What you really want is to kind of rise above those waters and the danger that's in that. You want to choose a time for your move that is going to be really effective, that is going to have the right kind of conditions, if you will. I'll just say weather conditions, that in terms of the internal perspectives within your organization, the challenges that you're facing, you want to make sure all that stuff is well aligned, so that when you do begin your migration and you get through it, you've already got in place great leadership. At the top levels of your firm are on board. They want to do this, and they're talking positively about it. You want to make sure that you plan for a smooth transition. You want to make sure that it's really, really well organized and that everything has been thought about. And it's very, very important to make sure that no one's left behind. The left behind folks are the ones that will continue to create fear, sow discord, not necessarily because they want to, but simply because their ability to effectively support the strategy, the operations, and the direction of your organization have been compromised by something that might have been done more effectively. So it's really important to get those things absolutely right. The terminology that we use around here a lot is get it done, do it right the first time, because the second time around things get a whole lot harder. There's a lot more moving pieces that are unpredictable, and the cooperation level of the folks that you need to work with have definitely been compromised. And if you do this, you'll have predictable outcomes, and you'll be able to enjoy going through the process of that project. If you're in that place and you're saying, we're thinking about this, we're thinking about a move to the cloud, certainly from a document management perspective, if you've never had document management before and you're thinking about this and you're thinking, what, cloud solutions have come a long way and we want to do this, that's one way of looking at it. If you're on premise and you're saying, we definitely want to get to the cloud and we need some help doing that, that's definitely something we can help you with. And if you're just wanting to have a conversation about the thought process of moving to the cloud, generally speaking, it may not necessarily have anything to do with iManage. We're happy to engage with you and just kind of throw things at you and maybe help a little bit with the thought process so that you can plan your next steps in a way that's going to be effective for you. We've been doing this a lot of years. We've done it in a way that's obtained the trust, in this case, of our primary vendor, iManage. And you see the quote there from Neil, who's the CEO at iManage. We've also gained the trust of significant clients. Just a couple examples here: Mordfriend and Boat Rocker, both from legal and corporate. Organizations that are at an enterprise level, several thousand employees have used our services to move content and to implement the iManage document management system, as well as to support it and to provide consulting around it. So, definitely we can give you examples similar to the ones I talked about earlier today with the, the movement of several terabytes for some significant organizations, to right down to, firms that are 2 or 3 or corporate legal departments that are 50 to 100. Broad gambit, different situations, but all of them manageable, and all of them which can be successful. And we're definitely willing and open to help you in any way that you need us to. So thank you very, very much for spending this time. Hopefully the information we shared was helpful, and we definitely look forward to answering any questions that you've got.
Perfect. And thank you again both to Nick and Howard for the presentation and the content, and RBRO for sponsoring. Just as he mentioned, if there's any questions that you have, please throw them into the Q&A as we wait for some of those to come in. Also, we have the evaluation polling that is on the screen. And just as a reminder, we will be posting the recording as well as the presentation out on our site within a few days. Let me see if anything's come in so far. It doesn't look like it at the moment, and as you can see, their contact information is on the screen and will be available with the posting as well. So if anything maybe comes to top of mind at a later date, you do have their information that you can reach out to them there. But it looks, oh, maybe we got one. Here we go. The question is asking, is performance ever used as a justification to move to the cloud?
That's a great question. It has been used as a justification to move to the cloud, in particular with distributed organizations. Where they've had issues with accessibility for folks in places where maybe their uplink from a WAN perspective to the central data center isn't great. Sometimes that's a challenge that would cause people to move to the cloud. It might also be that even internally within the data center, the kind of performance that you want is going to require a hardware upgrade. And you're thinking to yourself, that hardware upgrade is going to cost a whole lot more in the short term than a cloud move would, and the cloud move would allow us to spread our costs out over time and continue to enjoy the benefits of additional capabilities. So in many cases, move to the cloud allows you to punch a little bit above your weight for those organizations that are smaller in terms of the infrastructure side of things.
Perfect. Doesn't look like you have any other questions here. You must have answered all the ones they might have had. So again, just want to thank everybody for attending today, and we look forward to having you on future events. And thanks again to Nick and Howard. Have a great day, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.